Imagine a star billions of years old, its life extinguished, a cosmic corpse drifting silently in the void, yet within it something is moving. Not matter as we know it, not the violent bursts of a supernova, but something subtle, enigmatic, almost alive in its persistence. This is not science fiction. This is the frontier of modern astrophysics. Scientists peering across unimaginable distances with instruments that detect not light but the whispers of gravitational waves and neutrinos have found evidence of motion inside what should be a dead, inert star. The discovery challenges our understanding of matter, energy, and the very principles that govern life and death on a cosmic scale. The question arises, how can motion persist in a system that is, by all conventional measures, extinct? Could this motion, this residual activity, tell us something fundamental about the way energy organizes itself in the universe? Could the laws that govern the microcosm of the human brain also manifest in the macrocosm of stars long gone? Gone? The dead star becomes paradoxically a mirror for the living mind, and the line between life and inactivity blurs. To understand why this is important, we need to step beyond the obvious. Stars, like brains, are systems defined by flows and feedback loops. A living brain is not a static collection of neurons. It is an intricate network of electrical and chemical signals, constantly adapting, rewiring, and processing information. Similarly, a star is not merely a ball of gas and plasma. It is a dynamic system governed by energy gradients, nuclear reactions, and the subtle interplay of forces that dictate the behavior of matter at extreme densities. When a star dies, collapsing into a white dwarf, neutron star, or black hole, conventional wisdom tells us that all significant motion ceases. Gravity locks matter into place and nuclear reactions halt. But recent observations suggest that even in this quietude, certain forms of motion persist. Tiny oscillations, magnetic flux shifts, and subtle vibrations ripple through the core, detectable only through indirect measures, like variations in emitted X-rays or gravitational signals. It is as if the star, in its death, retains memory of its former energy, and the universe is whispering secrets to those who know how to listen. The human brain offers a compelling analogy. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself in response to new information, trauma, or environmental changes. Even after significant injury, the brain can reroute signals, create new synapses, and recover functions previously thought lost. A dead star, in some ways, exhibits a parallel phenomenon. The matter within it, though constrained by immense gravity and cooled to near absolute zero in relative terms, still participates in subtle interactions, guided by magnetic fields and quantum effects. Just as a neuron fires an electrical impulse not in isolation but as part of a complex network, plasma and degenerate matter in a stellar corpse communicate through oscillations and shifts that are astonishingly measurable. These motions challenge our definitions of activity and inactivity, of life and death, and hint at a universe far more interconnected and self-organizing than classical physics might suggest. But let's pause and consider the perception paradox. When scientists first detected these subtle movements, skepticism was high. How could there be motion where there should be none? The instrument's highly sensitive detectors capable of measuring infinitesimal gravitational distortions captured signals that appeared almost random, yet on closer analysis, patterns emerged. These patterns were reminiscent of the way our own minds detect anomalies in sensory input. When you perceive a sudden flicker in your peripheral vision, your brain interprets it as motion, even if nothing substantial has changed. Similarly, the star's internal movements are subtle cues in a vast sea of cosmic silence, demanding an intelligence to recognize and interpret them. The parallel is striking. Both the human brain and a dead star operate under rules that allow for hidden complexity, emergent behavior, and unexpected adaptation. Stress responses in humans provide another layer of insight. Under extreme conditions, such as fear or environmental pressure, the brain releases a cascade of neurotransmitters, optimizing survival responses in milliseconds. The energy distribution changes dynamically, creating a system that is more resilient than it appears. Could we imagine the dead star in a similar light? Though inert at a macroscopic level, Internally, it may respond to external gravitational perturbations or magnetic interactions in ways that optimize stability. These residual motions might not prevent its ultimate fate, but they reflect a principle seen throughout the universe. Systems, whether biological, neurological, or astrophysical, possess mechanisms to buffer themselves against chaos, to retain coherence in the face of decay. Motion persists where we expect none. Information is retained in forms we are only beginning to decode, and patterns emerge from apparent randomness. Quantum mechanics deepens the mystery. In a neutron star, matter is compressed to densities exceeding that of atomic nuclei. Under such conditions, quantum effects dominate. Pauli exclusion, superfluidity, and quantum tunneling all come into play. These effects create a milieu where particles behave collectively rather than individually. Oscillations inside the star may arise from quantum coherence across vast numbers of particles, akin to how neurons in the brain can synchronize to produce coherent thought or perception. What looks like movement in a dead star is, in a sense, a quantum echo of its former vitality. It reminds us that death at the macroscopic level does not preclude activity at the microscopic level. Energy finds pathways, signals propagate, and information persists. The boundaries between alive and dead, dynamic and static, are far more porous than classical definitions allow. Now consider perception in humans. Our minds construct reality based on sensory inputs, yet these constructions are not perfect mirrors of the external world. Optical illusions, memory distortions, and cognitive biases demonstrate that reality is always filtered through a dynamic, adaptive system. If a dead star can move in ways we cannot see directly and only infer through sophisticated measurement, does it not mirror the limitations of our own perception? Perhaps the universe is always moving in ways that our senses and instruments are only partially equipped to detect. Perhaps the true nature of reality is less about what is immediately observable and more about the subtle interactions, the hidden signals, the motions that persist beneath apparent stillness. In this sense, studying a dead star is an exercise not only in astrophysics but in epistemology. What can we know, and how can we know it? Let us introduce a thought experiment. Imagine that each subtle oscillation in the dead star corresponds to a potential quantum state, a hidden pathway that could, in theory, influence neighboring systems through gravity or radiation. This is not science fiction. In the realm of entangled particles and long-range forces, distant interactions can produce measurable consequences. The star, though dead, participates in a cosmic conversation, transmitting signals in ways we are only beginning to interpret. The analogy to the human brain is uncanny. Even in rest, the brain exhibits default mode activity, subtle internal chatter that maintains readiness and adapts to potential stimuli. The dead star, in its quiet oscillations, may similarly maintain an internal readiness, a form of energetic persistence that defies simple categorization. Here is the twist. Scientists originally believed that such motion would be chaotic, random, or insignificant. Yet the data reveals coherence. Patterns emerge that suggest a self-regulating mechanism, one that maintains the structural integrity of the star's interior. It is as if the system recognizes threats to its stability and responds in real time, albeit on a timescale and through forces that are almost incomprehensible to us. This mirrors a principle in neuroscience. What we perceive as weakness or vulnerability in a neural system may actually be a protective adaptation. When your cognitive or emotional responses falter under stress, it is not necessarily failure. It may be the brain prioritizing long-term survival, rerouting resources to preserve essential function. Similarly, motion inside a dead star is not a vestigial curiosity. It may be the star's strategy to maintain coherence against decay, a subtle but profound demonstration of nature's resilience. Let's explore the biological metaphor further. In multicellular organisms, death is rarely absolute. Cells continue to function, repair, and signal each other even after the organism has perished. Biologists call this necrotic signaling or post-mortem cellular activity. Similarly, the dead star demonstrates that at the boundary of death, motion and information can persist, revealing principles that span scales from the subatomic to the astronomical. The universe seems to operate on rules that favor persistence, adaptability, and latent potential, whether in neurons, cells, or degenerate stellar matter. This is a profound realization. The dynamics of life and the physics of death are not separate domains. They are variations on the same underlying principles of energy, information, and structural resilience. Neuroplasticity offers another fascinating insight. In the brain, repeated stimuli strengthen certain pathways, weakening others, a process sometimes summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together. Could the residual motions in a dead star follow a kind of cosmic plasticity? Perhaps repeated oscillations reinforce specific patterns, creating quasi-stable modes that persist over eons. These motions may not constitute life in a conventional sense, but they do represent a form of memory, a record of the star's history encoded in motion, energy, and field interactions. The analogy to consciousness is striking. The persistence of information, even without awareness, points to a universe where history and structure are inseparable, and where dead systems retain echoes of their former vitality. Philosophically, this challenges our notions of existence. If a dead star can move, retain patterns, and transmit subtle signals, then the boundary between being and non-being becomes fluid. Life, death, activity, and inactivity are points on a spectrum rather than binary states. The universe may not distinguish sharply between alive and dead. It may simply be a network of interacting energy and information, continually adjusting, oscillating, and persisting in forms we are only beginning to decode. As humans, we experience consciousness as dynamic, adaptive, and context-sensitive. A dead star, in its quiet, invisible motions, exhibits a parallel phenomenon at a cosmic scale: latent activity, responsiveness, and emergent behavior beyond simple thermodynamic predictions. Consider also the metaphysical implication. Energy is never destroyed, only transformed. The motion inside a dead star is not a violation of physics. It is an illustration of its subtlety. Gravity, quantum fields, and residual magnetic energy interact in ways that produce coherent motion even after nuclear fusion ceases. These dynamics remind us that inactivity is often an illusion, and that beneath apparent stillness lies a hidden world of processes, interactions, and emergent phenomena. The universe is alive, not just in the stars we see burning brightly, but also in those we presume dead, in the spaces between galaxies, and in the tiniest quanta of energy. It is a poetic reminder that movement, adaptation, and persistence are universal principles, encoded in the very fabric of reality. As we reflect on this, consider the human mind once again. Stress, trauma, and perceived failure often obscure the hidden adaptability within us. Just as the dead star continues to move subtly, our brains continue to adapt, rewire, and maintain coherence even in extreme conditions. The insight is humbling. Apparent inactivity, weakness, or stillness may conceal deep, underlying dynamics that preserve potential and information. Motion, whether in neurons or degenerate stellar matter, is resilient, persistent, and often hidden from immediate perception. This convergence of neuroscience, physics, and philosophy offers a profound lesson. Reality is more intricate than it appears, and our understanding must embrace subtlety, interconnectedness, and hidden complexity. Finally, the discovery of motion in dead stars is not just an astrophysical curiosity. It is a metaphor for resilience, persistence, and the persistence of information. It compels us to ask, what else do we assume to be inert, static, or lifeless that might harbor hidden dynamics? What processes in our own minds, bodies, or societies operate quietly, beyond immediate detection, shaping outcomes in ways we do not yet perceive? By studying the motion inside a dead star, we are invited to expand our conception of life, activity, and intelligence. We learn that the universe is not a collection of discrete, isolated objects, but a dynamic, self-organizing system where energy, information, and structure persist in ways both visible and invisible, immediate and subtle, mundane and extraordinary. This revelation has implications not just for astrophysics, but for philosophy, neuroscience, and even personal introspection. If a dead star can move, retain memory, and adapt subtly over eons, and perhaps every system we encounter, biological, cognitive, or social, contains hidden layers of motion and potential. Our task is to learn to perceive these layers, to recognize the signals beneath apparent stillness, and to appreciate the intricate dynamics that sustain coherence against entropy. In doing so, we cultivate a mindset attuned to subtlety, pattern recognition, and the interplay between what is visible and what is hidden. In conclusion, the motion discovered inside a dead star reminds us that the universe is far richer, more subtle, and more interconnected than we often assume. It challenges our notions of life and death, activity and stillness, perception and reality. It invites us to reflect on the parallels between cosmic and neural systems, between the persistence of energy and the adaptability of the mind. And it encourages philosophical humility, that much of what matters may be occurring quietly, invisibly, and yet profoundly, beneath the surface of perception. As you ponder this, ask yourself, what hidden motions persist in your own life, mind, or surroundings, and how might recognizing them transform your understanding of resilience, adaptation, and the persistence of information? If this exploration of the universe sparked your curiosity, expand it further by joining our community of knowledge seekers. Hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts on how dead stars challenge our understanding of life and motion, and subscribe to MindSpark Science for more journeys into the frontiers of science, mind, and philosophy. Every new discovery is a reminder that the universe, like our own consciousness, is endlessly rich, subtly active, and waiting for those willing to look deeply.